Anyway, the Stoics, they didn't do philosophy like we did philosophy at my university, right? They thought you could use philosophy to work out practical problems, like everyday real life problems, right? So people would be coming in with problems like, my wife's cheating on me, someone insulted me at the marketplace, and they'd try and work it out. They weren't doing it like we did it at my university degree, right? No one was coming up to them like, help, I got attacked by barbarians. They were like, well, what is an attack? Oh, you stabbed me. What is getting stabbed?
As Michael rightly points out, the Stoics were preeminently concerned with working out practical problems. Indeed, so much so that some academic philosophers from about the 19th century onward considered what they were doing to not really be all that philosophical by comparison to, say, what Plato or Aristotle were doing. Fortunately, we have a much better appreciation of that in the 21st century, and going back into the mid to late 20th century of what was going on in these great Stoic texts and thinkers than they had in the 19th century. If you read, for example, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, where these are essentially some self-talk and some using Stoic philosophy to make sense out of the crazy stuff that he had to encounter every day, you'll see a lot of discussion of practical problems, how to deal with losing your temper at somebody, how to fix things once you've done that. Seneca, he has to deal with all sorts of other interesting problems. Epictetus would have people coming to him asking, hey, my brother's ticked off at me. How can I get him to stop being ticked off? Or a guy will come to him and Epictetus will say, what's your family life like? And the guy will say, oh, it's terrible, My daughter was sick the other day and I thought she might die and I was so bothered by it, I left the house, It's these sorts of things. By the way, when Epictetus hears that, he says, there's something wrong here with you. And the Stoics would engage in analysis. Like Michael points out, they use something like the Socratic method, which is to ask the person questions, to try to elicit a response from them. Because it's very important, as Socrates would say, the only judge that I'm really concerned with is you yourself and what you think of the thing. So why don't you think it through? You're the only person I need to try to convince. That's what he would say to all of his interlocutors. And so the Stoic would do something quite similar. It was actually quite therapeutic in many respects. He'd help somebody to see more clearly about what assumptions they're making or what the effects of their actions were likely to be, or what sort of priorities their actions were displaying and what kind of priorities they really do want to express and whether there was a disconnect between those. So as he's pointing out, academic philosophy often doesn't get anywhere. We can talk about somebody writing an article that makes a major contribution to a contemporary discussion that only 5 or 6 people are actually reading, or, perhaps 100 people. These Stoic philosophers were engaging with the kind of day-to-day problems that us ordinary people have to do. Even those of us who are academic philosophers, we also, have to put on our pants one leg at a time, as they say, just like everybody else, and our lives are composed of the same sorts of issues that everybody else's are. In many respects, it's really fortuitous to have a comedian who is also trained as a philosopher and then who studied Stoic philosophy, because when you think about the components of comedy, the raw material that they work from, a lot of that is ready for philosophical examination. I should point out, however, to be fair to my colleagues in the traditional academy, and here I'm thinking of really 2 different groups of people, that there are quite a few academic philosophers who may engage with the Stoics or may engage with other great currents of thought and are bringing philosophy to bear on very practical questions, much the same as the Stoics were in their own time. Some of these are people who are historians of philosophy, and they contribute to our understanding of Stoics like Epictetus. Some of them are the people who do the you might say, service teaching in the trenches at the 4-year liberal arts universities, at the big state universities, in the places that aren't getting an awful lot of prestige, but where so many of the students are taught, and where they bring the students into an encounter with Plato, with Aristotle, with these great Stoic thinkers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, even the Stoics through somebody like Cicero. So there isn't always this complete disconnect between academic philosophy and philosophy as applied to practical problems.